All right, ladies and gentlemen, strap in, relax. It'll be a little bit of a longer video. I apologize, but we're going to power through the idea of the English Civil War pretty gosh darn quickly here, okay, is what we're going to do. So we're going to start by looking at the idea of what happens in England, right? Let's pick up where England left off, right? Now, I understand English society at this time, after Elizabeth, okay, capitalism was part of it, okay? There was social mobility. You know, how you move up and down social status. A little bit. The commercial revolution really did that. We talk about the expanding middle class, right? This middle class was getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger because of trade and all kind of stuff going on. You also have improvements with the area of agriculture, so better farming. You have new crops coming from the New World, new fields being cleared out by taking over common lands, and now we're also rotating our crops. So they figured out that if you plant the exact same thing on the exact same piece of land for a long, long time, it's going to kill the soil. But if we rotate our crops, right? One crop this year, one crop this year, then leave it fallow, rotate, maybe this way, whatever, okay? Then you're going to have better success. If you're making money, right? That middle class becomes very, very powerful in England. We call them the gentry. They were wealthy landowners. They weren't nobles. They didn't have the noble title. They weren't sir. But they're very wealthy. And they're the ones, because they're landowners, who be elected to the House of Commons. Now, the Parliament of England, remember, okay, if we looked at this ever, has two houses to it. There's the House of Commons, the House of Lords. The House of Commons represents the people. House of Lords you get because you have sir in front of your name, to make it simple, okay? And then upper class allows these commercially successful landowners to be in the House of Commons. And they have a legal precedent, though, okay? Their job is to keep the king in check. And they were given this back in the days of 1215 and the Magna Carta. They said, yeah, by the way, kingy person, okay? Your goal is to, if you're going to try and do stuff, you got to get our approval first. You don't have full power. And so, they'll pay taxes, okay? If HOC, people are going to pay taxes, the nobles are going to pay taxes if the House of Commons has a say in what's going on. And so it's this idea of permission again. We talked about this in class. You need permission to make taxes. As long as they had to say, it's good. It wasn't as big a deal in France. France has stigma on this. We'll talk about France more, where France had absolutism, where what the king said, went. Religiously, in England, forget. Calvinists, the Anglicans, are the largest part of the population. There were other groups, though, too. Okay, you had Puritans. I respectfully call them Calvinists on steroids. They want to, and I quote, purify the church. It means take out all the old things from Catholic elements. Hierarchy, golden candlesticks, fancy churches, all the ceremony, that kind of stuff. These are guys who did 8-hour-long sermons, were very strict on each other, wanted to really focus on what was happening. Protestant work ethic does play a role here. Calvinists, the biggest part of your population, believe in predestination, the day of working. So Protestant work ethic play a role here too, and we're trying to keep out Catholic influence, because remember, we used to be Catholic. We're told that was bad. Let's try and keep it out of here. Remember, Parliament is an elected body. It's really weird because, honestly, only 3% of all people could actually vote, okay? Voting was based off of how much land you own, how old you were, if you were male or female, all those things. And when you brought down all those things that were in, who could vote, there's only 3% of people. So, honestly, it really wasn't hard at all to buy people off. And, if you want to be in House of Commons, you just pay the right people, grease the right palms, you're good to go. And when they passed their bills, they had to be introduced in Parliament. Just like we have today. Obviously, there's some, inspiration there. They had passed both houses. So I think House of Commons is like our House of Representatives. House of Lords, like our Senate, got passed both. The monarch was like our executive. It had to pass by the monarch, be signed into law as a way to check power. And the unique thing we have here is that as a way to check power, is the monarch, if they wanted to, could dismiss Parliament, cancel the whole thing. Guys, imagine if President Obama had the power to dismiss Congress, right? Those are little checky things there, okay? There are two big questions we see. Kind of saw the idea of constitutionalism and absolutism. But could the king govern without consent of Parliament? Can he exist? Secondly, would the Anglican Church go a little different? Would they become more hierarchy-based? Okay. And lastly, would Presbyterians get more popular in Scotland? I'll ask a question right here. Anyway, let's backtrack a little bit. Overarching ideas, right? Backtrack a little bit here. James I. He was a king of Scotland of the House of Stuart. He was also a cousin of Queen Elizabeth I and her heir. Because she had no children, obviously, the Tudor line dies with Elizabeth I. And because King James VI of Scotland was next in line, he got become the King of England as well. And in a way, unites two parts. Well, here's a little different. He didn't believe in this whole, Parliament thing. He thought divine of right. So basically, his idea was that the right of kings comes from God. You want to keep the bishops in England, keep them in the church, keep all his parts there because he thought that his power, reason he was king, came from God. Big believer of absolutism. To the point where he was actually target of the gunpowder plot. If you've seen V for Vendetta, Guy Fawkes was planning to blow up Parliament, get rid of it because of this guy. All right, and that's where Guy Fawkes comes in, and we just had Guy Fawkes say that not too long ago. James I, you see him over here, had some issues. Right, he needs a lot of money. The idea is he wanted clothing. Remember, we weren't used to having a male monarch anymore. He needed clothes, and he spent a lot of money on clothing. He spent his entire budget on clothing. It's really weird. There were homosexual accusations of him with the Duke of Buckingham, all that kind of stuff going on. So he wasn't a super popular monarch with Parliament. People questioned what he was doing, all that kind of stuff. Plus, he was Scottish. He did a lot of great things, though. He did things in arts. He was Shakespeare's money guy. He's the one who backed Shakespeare. He had the idea of the King James Bible was written in his time. A lot of great things. Kept people out of war. Overall, pretty popular monarch if you're the right people. He died in 1625 after 22 years of reign, and his son Charles I is going to succeed him. Now, Charles I has problems. Chuck needs some bucks. All right? Charles I needs money for war. That war, of course, being the 30 Years' War. And Charles, his son, did not get along with Parliament. He would ask for money, and he would say no. So he would dissolve Parliament. And again, he would ask for money and more taxes, or to stop free speech, or those kind of things, and Parliament would say no. And Charles' response was to dissolve Parliament. Elizabeth I, understand, did a lot of good things as Queen of England. She also left a lot of debt because of the war she fought, supporting the Dutch, all those kind of things, fighting off the Spanish, all that kind of stuff, all right? And, the wars cost money. A lot of money had to be borrowed. England was already in debt because of James. And there's just issues here, you know what I mean? And, England has some money issues. And so Charles I here, who was taking over for James, definitely believed in divine right, just like his father did, okay? He wanted to have control of England, wanted control of the church as well, kind of wanted France to go on. He needed that money. And so he found these cost-cutting ways to start taking people off. One way was to quarter English soldiers in the homes of people because they didn't have the money to put them in barracks, put in people's homes. Hint, hint, revolution, cough, cough, nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Just like happened in the United States 100 years later, it was very unpopular. He had the nobles arrested. Get this one. The nobles arrested for not lending money to government. Their main source of income was people in England lending money to the government, those who were rich. And he got mad, and if you didn't do it, he would arrest you. Parliament was not a fan of Charles, and Charles had the issue here. Parliament just wanted a deal, okay? Parliament said, we want to be assured of basic rights. If we get those basic rights from the king, we will give you your tax increases. What they basically said was that only Parliament could make taxes, give loans, that kind of thing. Essentially, taking the purse strings away from the king. As part of this deal, they would also want a due process of law. Everybody's laws got the same. There's no issue between noble and non-noble for how trials went for you. Everybody gets the exact same trial. No court of soldiers, and the king just couldn't take over. They said, if you agree to all this stuff, right? Here's your ultimatum. Here is the offer you can't refuse. Okay? If you do that, we'll give you your tax increase. Tough call. Okay? Tough call. And Charles I had to decide what he wanted to do. So what does he do? Like any good monarch, he dissolves Parliament because he wanted to control the taxes. He gets rid of it, we threw Parliament in. And he couldn't agree to a lot of things. One was, allowing Catholicism, allowing other Christian religions in. All those things were issues. And essentially, he rules out of Parliament until 1640 as an absolute monarch. Rocked the taxes up, people had to pay. He did something called ship money. Usually, only counties on the shoreline, right, paid for ships because, but here's my country, here's my England, it's terrible England, whatever. There's Northern England, Scotland, okay. Traditionally, only counties that were on the coast here would pay for ships, because if I have a ship, I have my boat, it's only really impacting those who are in the counties. Well, Charles wanted more money, he wanted more ships, so he said, you're all going to pay for ships. And to tell people on the inside. He also started ripping on the Puritans. He thought Puritans weren't very good, Puritans were causing too much trouble, and didn't like them either. So, they finally re-elected Parliament, okay, 1640. Charles wants to change some stuff, right? Charles requires the Scots now to use the English prayer book. English prayer book is Anglican, most Scottish are Presbyterian. The Scottish nobles start revolting. Charles like, I need to fight a war. Chuck needs some bucks. Chuck needs some money. Goes to Parliament. Says, Parliament, I need some money. Give me the money. They say no. Once again, dissolves it a month later. Brings it back again. Dissolves it again. And Charles eventually agrees to the plans. We keep a long Parliament. Essentially, we call it a long Parliament because it goes on for about 8 years. Okay, where it meets every 3 years. No more ship money. Can't be dissolved anymore unless they deal stuff, right? They execute the leaders of Puritan issues. Got rid of the Star Chamber. A lot of things they did. Okay, they basically keep making compromises back and forth. When the election comes down, though, the Puritans are majority in Parliament. This will be very, very important. Okay, is that Charles made all these deals. He kind of took away some of his power here. He kind of took away some of his power here. He kind of took away some of his power here, right? And agreed to the man so he could get the money. He didn't get money to fight Ireland, but he got money to fight Scotland. Good enough, okay? But Puritans are a major power now in Parliament, and Puritans are going to make things difficult for him to come forward. Now, we have this issue in Ireland now. There's a rebellion in Ireland. It happens a lot through history, okay? And Charles says, Parliament, I need an army. I need money to put it down. Parliament says no. Charles then arrests the Puritans. Now remember, he before had said no martial law. Now he's bringing martial law in here a little bit. So Charles declares war on his opponents of Parliament. Parliament gets an army. He gets an army, and it's on. Okay? You have these two sides. And we actually have cute nicknames for these two sides. We have the Cavaliers for the supporters of the king because they were the clergy and the very Anglican people and the rich nobility. They're called Cavaliers because they had, put my little face here, they had long hair, in essence, of the nobles, okay? And were a very rich person, very cavalier in their appearance. Looks like a squid, whatever. Whereas the Roundheads had very, very short, close-cropped hair. And it's because they were more of the businessmen, some nobles, but mostly merchant class type people. And so that's kind of where these two names come from. But these two sides have a battle on drawn of who's going to control England, the king or Parliament. Not and, but or. And these two sides fight an actual war over it. And in the end, because a Puritan independent kind of steps up, Oliver Cromwell becomes the military leader of this whole thing. Starts as one unit, eventually becomes the leader of the army. And he creates what's called the New Model Army. His army is pretty new. He had no politics, no issues. What he said went. They were professional and they were paid. They were not mercenaries. They were not a volunteer army. Their one job was to kick butt, take names, and they're all out of names. Okay? He made them all look the same, gave them the same uniform, same training, same everything. At the very last battle he had at Naseby, Charles I surrenders, Parliament disbands army, but Cromwell refuses. And once again, Charles leads an army in, Cromwell wins, King Charles is defeated. So Cromwell has his army. He's a general. He goes into Parliament and takes out all of the non-Puritans, leaving only Puritans in Parliament. We call this the rump Parliament because there are only 1/5 members left. The rump, okay, little part of it. And they decide to take King Charles. They lead him out, and they execute him. He's the first king to be executed by his own subjects. In fact, they didn't even know how to do this originally. They had to go back to old Roman documents just to figure out how to actually execute a king. As happens, new issues start forming. You had levelers that developed in England who were basically religious radicals who wanted more equal society. They saw this issues being caused by levels of rich and poor and all that kind of stuff, right? And they wanted to level things out, make everybody on an equal plane, and argued for that. You had diggers who said Parliament has zero authority, it should be a king, right? You had Quakers who believed in pacifists, right? That we're all really good people, and they rejected the Church of England and said there's this inner light that takes us all, and we should all be working together, all that kind of stuff. Not good, okay? So we have this interregnum period of 11 years in England. where essentially House of Commons rules without House of Lords and a monarchy. There's no king in this 11 years. And they have this 44,000 person army that takes people out and essentially rules as a martial law, with Lord Cromwell ruling as Lord Protector, also known as a dictator. There being knights and abdicator. And anybody who tried to invade, like King Charles did, his followers got beaten by Cromwell. So essentially he creates almost like this, I want to say like Hunger Games type situation, right? But he gets rid of the parliament, has these military districts that are ruled by generals, and takes away all freedom. Basically, everyone's got to be Puritan, okay? He denies freedom, so, you couldn't be Anglican, you could be Catholic, you had to be Puritan, though he allows Jews to return, which is really questioning, okay? And try to make England Puritan. And Puritan means that there is no fun league now in England, right? He outlaws dancing. He outlaws music. He outlaws sports. He outlaws theater. Outlaws anything fun. Your job now is to be Puritan, okay? Which people like too much. But he rules for 11 years, and eventually he dies in 1660. And his son, Richard, took over and was a very, very poor ruler. In fact, his nickname was Queen Dick. Yep. Okay? Because Richard, right, he was that bad of ruler. And as Richard is ruling so poorly, he's overthrown, and Parliament steps back up, and they're going to reinstate Charles II, the next in line of the throne, as king. And so here's Chucky II, all right? We're keeping in line. He's son of Charles I, invited back to the throne from Scotland, and once again, there's a king of England. Now, there was deals made to make this thing happen, right? Charles was given the throne back, but he could not be an absolute monarch. He basically said, you are going to be subordinate to Parliament, and he agreed with that to have the throne. He said also religious toleration has to happen, especially to Catholics, and Charles is cool with that. In fact, they named Charles the Merry Monarch because after this 11 years of Puritan rule, he did all kinds of cool things. He allowed singing and dancing and sports and theater, all kinds of stuff came back. He got along with Parliament. I mean, he was okay with limited monarchy. And he signed the idea of habeas corpus, stating that if you're going to lock you up in jail, they got to charge you first. All those kind of things he did. It was awesome. It was great. Until he needed money, and Parliament wouldn't give him any. And so she contacted France for a loan. Said, I'm going to convert for a loan. And then he dies. The problem is he doesn't have any kids. And so we're going to stay back in a second here, okay? As this whole thing is going, Parliament gets more power, we see political parties start forming. You have the Tories and the Whigs. The Tories are the upper class, support the monarchy, okay? Very conservative. The Whigs being the middle class, fair Parliament, a lot more liberal. Two big names here, okay? Because they're going to kind of fall in line pretty closely. There are different acts trying to be done here after 1660 to get people out of office. So try to draw the Puritans out after this whole Puritan move because people were pretty mad at him, right? I mean, the Puritans had killed the king, all kind of stuff, right? And it was backed out. So he performed tests, basically said Puritans couldn't be in politics anymore. It wasn't good. Your habeas corpus act was trying to limit that power from Charles because they wanted to keep prisoners in court, make sure they had need cause for imprisonment. You couldn't just lead long trials out. A lot of things we see in our Bill of Rights kind of come from this idea here. Interesting part here is that when Charles took the throne, okay, Scotland was actually independent, and he really wanted to change this church here. And so we actually call this time of Charles II the killing time in Scotland because as Scotland resisted, a lot of them got killed by Charles and by his armies because they wanted to change the church, okay? He wanted to change the church and Scotland resisted to it. And so there are some bad things that happen too, not so Merry Monarch kind of stuff as well going on here. The big question here, and we said, Charles said that, I'm going to convert for a loan, right? Is that did he really support Catholicism? And the question was, let's do this. And why would this be a big deal? The Catholics didn't want a lot of freedom, and they started making deals with Louis of France, who's the premier king at this time. One of the things that really ticked off Parliament was that originally Charles, because he had no kids, was his brother James would become the next king. And Parliament actually made a law stating that, we're going to make that law a different deal. And we're going to say that James cannot become a king. And so, especially the Catholics, essentially stopping his brother. So he dissolves Parliament, comes back, starts going back and forth. In the end, Charles actually declares himself a Catholic on his deathbed. So it's kind of this religious, fight coming back again too, and causing more troubles for England. So here we have James II. I call him the not-so-merry monarch versus his brother Charles, because he believed in divine right, same as Charles and James I. He said, I'm king, I'm absolutist, my power comes from God, so hear me roar. Parliament did not like that. He ignored all the religious laws that had been passed. So the Test Act that had been passed said you couldn't put Catholics in positions of power. Didn't care. Put Catholics in anyway. He tried to let everybody run, everybody take care of stuff we wanted. It did lead to what we call the Glorious Revolution. So essentially, it's the last piece between absolutism and constitutionalism, because Parliament tried to get more power. Essentially, there are two issues. You had Declaration of Indulgence and the birth of a Catholic heir to the throne. If James has a kid, and he did have a kid, that means we're back to being Catholic England. And so they had to try and figure a way around this issue of how do we keep a Catholic off the English throne. And what they do is they look to James' daughters. Okay, Mary and Anne were both Protestants, and Mary had married William of Orange of the Netherlands. And so basically, Parliament forces James to abdicate, forces him out of office, out of the throne, and says, "Hey, William of Orange, you're a king. You're married to the queen, to the next in line. Why don't you become our king?" And so William's like, "Sure, why not? I'll become king." And all of a sudden, you get invited to become king of France. He brings 15,000 troops with him. Okay, brought him over. He's here to fight against James. They fight a couple little battles. James has to run away. And William and Mary now declared as joint sovereigns. Have you heard of the College of William and Mary? Maryland is named after Queen Mary. And so James eventually runs away to France as he's the king in exile. We see a lot of things made at this time. We have things like an English Bill of Rights made right away to protect and make England a limited monarchy, a constitutional monarchy, right? They a lot of things. You cannot be a Catholic king. Laws are only made at Parliament. Parliament has free speech. The standing army in peacetime, not legal. They couldn't do that kind of stuff. It was not legal to have a standing army, nuisance of bails, punishments, all that kind of stuff. These are very, very familiar, right, to our own Bill of Rights here. Notice, but Catholics get left out a lot. They couldn't have guns. All those kind of things are going on here. There was a Toleration Act, okay, that said all Protestants could worship. Notice Toleration Act, but no Jews, Catholics, or Unitarians. Toleration, right? That kind of thing. And an Act of Union, whereas Scotland creates Great Britain. And Scotland really wanted to kind of get into the trade business, and so they agreed to get into trade to merge with England and make what we now call it a Great Britain. And there was a kind of fear there, that Catholic Stuarts returned to Scotland, but really Scotland became a lot more modern. Scotland was really behind the times as this was, and it got involved in the Commercial Revolution, becoming more and more and a bigger deal. We'll talk about this in class a little more as we kind of go through more ideas about this Glorious Revolution and what happens. Here's kind of the short version of it. We'll get involved more in class with it. Thanks for paying attention. Thanks for sticking with us, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate us doing that. Thank you all very, very much.